Hello, comic book fans. Pete here from Comic Books Transformed, where we talk about your favorite streaming shows and movies that have been adapted from your favorite comic books. I'm here with my good friend Brian. And Brian, it's Saturday, not Thursday.
Yeah, I had to cram a little bit on these shows because we kept saying we are gonna add all these extra shows, and then I'm like, oh, you know what? We should just do the last episode of the arc so we can finish it out. And I just couldn't finish it in time, so here we are.
Whoa! Yes. So for today, the shows that Brian is talking about, we are going to talk about She-Hulk, Attorney at Law, episode 4, and then we are talking about The Sandman, which is on Netflix, and that is episodes 7 through 9. So I was going to ask you.
We're not doing 10?
No.
Oh, okay.
All right. Yeah, because we'll do 10 and 11 next time.
Well, I thought it would be easier to do 10 with this because it kind of wraps up the whole arc, sort of.
Oh shit! Well, I didn't.
All right. Okay. Well, we'll go through that. Hopefully, I don't spoil anything.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't even watch the 10th one. I'm sorry.
Okay. No worries. Well, I pretty much remember where it ends, so I think I can. I think I can handle it.
Okay. Yes. So, did you see that Netflix actually was gonna stop dumping shows? They were gonna go back to weekly installments.
So you said dumping shows. I'm like, oh, they're gonna stop canceling things, but no,
no, that's never gonna happen.
No. Yes, I did see that. I wasn't sure how valid that was so far, but I hope so. Like I would love to watch Netflix shows one at a time, once a week or something like that. Even if it's 2, whatever. I don't care. Just give me some space. Like a show like this needs to breathe. I mean, The Sandman needs to breathe
yes.
a little bit, I think, and I think it would have been a lot more enjoyable to watch. I mean, we sort of did watch it a little bit at a time here. We did 3 episodes at a time, and that's definitely better than cramming it all, 10 episodes, 11 episodes into, a weekend or something like that. I hate doing that.
Oh, dude, so do I. It's like the kind of thing where you're like cramming food, if you're like rushing because you have to maybe take a short lunch break at work and you're just cramming your food in. It's like you can't sit there and savor it, enjoy it. And I mean, honestly, just from a practical point of view, having the show come out once a week is much better for guys like us, right? Because, people get advanced copies of shows. They watch the whole season and they review it, and it comes out like the day of the release of the show. Meanwhile, you and I are like, we're covering a show that came out like a month ago at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right. So with that being said, why don't we jump into She-Hulk, because that's kind of the closest one to current, right?
Sure.
So we're up to episode 4, and besides the death of the Queen, and also like Harry Styles spitting on Chris Pine, or maybe not spitting on Chris Pine, the buzz of this week was Madison from She-Hulk.
And that's with the Y and not where you think.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I have to, right at the bat, my initial impression of Madison was I thought it was kind of annoying. But I watched it again. Well, my wife was watching it, and I was kind of like paying attention to the background. I don't know. Something clicked a little more the second time around. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Maybe I gave into the peer pressure of everyone loving it. I don't know.
But
it didn't bother me as much the second time around.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought up like the peer pressure of everybody liking it, because this show is absolutely broken into 2 camps, and I'm kind of worried that like maybe this is going to be the case with all Disney-owned properties at this point. Star Wars, Marvel, what else? Indiana Jones when it eventually comes out, where it's like there's going to be people that are like passionately like tearing the show down or the movie down, or they are like saying, oh, how could you not like this? This is so good. And it's like, why is everything so polarized? Like reality is not polarized. Like obviously something could, use criticism, but it could also still be good, like like for this episode in particular, I did not like the stuff with Madison, but then I go on Twitter and like, she has like a little fucking hashtag picture or whatever they call those,
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and there's people like I saw one person tweet where it was like Madison and Wong, and then who was the other one? It was the girl that was in the first Kat Dennings, and then who's the guy that's in WandaVision that does the card tricks?
Jimmy Woo.
Jimmy Woo. They were like
the actor Randall Park.
Right. And so someone was basically had pictures of those 4 characters and like, this should be the Fantastic Four right here. And like when I saw that, I was like, that kind of would be a fun movie, but I'm like, what is going on here? Am I kind of getting sucked into this hype? Because like, honestly, I didn't think that her jokes were funny. I did like that they were watching The Sopranos. Yeah. Have you ever seen The Sopranos?
I have actually not. I'm not a fan of the kind of mafia, mobster kind of stuff. I've never seen The Godfather. I've never seen Goodfellas. I've never seen The Sopranos.
I mean, you grew up on Staten Island. I wonder why that might be the case.
that kind of explains it. Just a quick tangent, though. You mentioned a fan casting or funny casting of Fantastic Four, and to me, nothing beats these two. It's the Always Sunny cast as the Fantastic Four.
Oh yes.
And then What We Do in the Shadows cast as a Fantastic Four.
Oh, I didn't think of that one. Who use their character names from What We Do in the Shadows for who's who for the Fantastic Four?
Nandor was Reed. Nadia was Sue.
Obviously,
Colin Robinson was Ben, and Guillermo was Johnny, and then Laszlo was Dr. Doom.
Oh, that is! Oh my God! I feel like we're just surprised now.
That's what sold me on it was Laszlo's Dr. Doom.
Exactly. Like we live in this poor timeline that doesn't exist as a movie.
Yeah.
Did someone do like fan art of that?
No, they just did like a collage of the actual characters. And then for Always Sunny, do you watch It's Always Sunny, or have you ever watched?
I watched like maybe the first 3 seasons, I think.
Okay, well, to me it's a little more obvious for that one. So it was Mac was Reed, Dee was Sue, Frank is obviously Ben, Charlie is Johnny, and then oh my God, I forgot his name. Glenn Howerton. Dennis is Doom.
Oh, okay. I like that too.
That's pretty good too, honestly.
Yes. Man, I want to watch that show too. There's so much shit to watch. It's like ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah.
But what I was gonna say was, there's been rumors about Marvel casting people, and that it's gonna be released at this D23.
That could be being announced right now, for all we know.
I know, we're doing this live show. People could be talking about this shit right now. I know. But like, the one piece of art that I saw that was fan casting was John Boyega as Cyclops.
Man, I mean, if they go with that, and then they go with Giancarlo Esposito and Denzel as Charles and Eric, that'd be a major shift overall. With the race changing. I'm not a crazy fan of John Boyega's. The only thing I really loved him in was and I just watched this recently, was Attack the Block.
Yes, that is really good. Yes.
Fantastic in that movie. Perfect. Mm-hmm. But I didn't really like him as Finn. I didn't really like him in Pacific Rim Uprising. I don't think I remember. Well, I mean, that wasn't that great of a movie. And I love the first one. And the show that was on Netflix was pretty good too, actually.
What show? Pacific Rim?
Yeah. The Black, Pacific Rim, The Black. It was pretty good.
Was his character in that?
No. It was completely. There was you. I think you got like a brief cameo of Herc Hansen, and I think that was it. That was the only connection to the older stuff.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't think I even remember John Boyega being in anything that I can off the top of my head. But to me, like Attack the Block, he was fantastic. I loved it. Yep. And Finn and I couldn't remember his. I mean, I know he was.
Oh.
No. I'm talking about Pacific Rim.
Okay.
I know he was Idris Elba's son, but I can't remember his name.
Oh yeah, and like Idris Elba's name is like so ridiculous too. His name's like Phoenix Mercury or something. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no. Okay, his name is Jake Pentecost. Okay.
Yeah, there you go. Right.
I said the one. The other one just came to me.
Right. Well, no, it's funny, right? Because I saw Attack the Block before I saw The Force Awakens because I knew he was cast, in this movie. I'm like, okay, let's see what this guy's like. And he was like amazing in Attack the Block. I think he's good in The Force Awakens, but boy, did they do him dirty in the other two.
Yeah, I would
sequel
totally agree
trilogy.
with that. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, okay, so that's actually kind of a good segue though back to She-Hulk though, right? Because like all the stuff that we love so much that we grew up with, like Disney essentially owns pretty much all of it, except for the Warner Brothers DC stuff, right? And it just has become so polarized where it's like you either love the new Star Wars content or you hate it. You love the Phase 4 MCU stuff or you hate it. And like this She-Hulk show, I'm assuming that you're going to say kind of what you've said for the past few weeks, where you say that like you love Tatiana Maslany and maybe you like some of the jokes, but you're not sitting there complaining about like the agenda of Marvel or Disney, right? Like,
no, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the thing is, there's flaws, I think, with this show, and I want to address the flaws, but yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, cutting you off.
No, I do like the show. I think the first episode was the strongest for me. I actually was over the moon over the first episode, pretty much, and I have not been as entertained since then. And that's fine. It's not a bad show. It's not a great show either. There, like you said, there are flaws here. I did find Madison kind of annoying at first. I said she did grow on me a little bit. I think it's more the combination of her and Wong that I liked.
Right,
I like
ditto.
that kind of opposites kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think we both can agree we both like Wong in the MCU, although maybe they're overusing him at this point now.
So there is one person that's very vocal that seems to be in the, doesn't like all the Disney stuff, all the Marvel stuff, Phase 4 stuff. And I'm not going to mention him because I don't like being associated with this stuff, but I try to like at least hear one person's perspective because it's usually the opposite of my own. So I want to hear, and I feel like he brings up some valid points. And one of the criticisms that he had was, I think that this show actually was not like, the episodes weren't necessarily arranged in sequential order. So like in the last episode you had Wong, he was going to defend, he was for the defense for Emil Blonsky, and then they say, well, you broke him out of prison, that's a law against the law, and he like runs away.
Yeah.
And then automatically in this very next episode he's like, I need my lawyer, I need help with the law. So it's like he's in trouble with the American law system and he leaves, and then the very next episode he comes back. And I think that like maybe they wrote this episode or planned this episode to come later in the lineup, and it shows up in this part,
Either that or they just didn't really consider it. Maybe the aspect of him, maybe the joke of him running away from the Blonsky case was just an afterthought and it wasn't really considered in the plot. Because in that episode, they don't know who he is at first because they're like Wong, and they're like he lives in Nepal or New York or whatever, and they make some jokes about that. So they didn't know who he was at first. So it's not like this episode was supposed to come before that.
Right. But I'm thinking that maybe it would come later in the season.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah.
It's possible. I mean, have you seen the newer trailer for She-Hulk?
It's got Daredevil.
Yeah, it's got more Daredevil in it. Obviously, we see a lot of Titania, and how that plot's going to work out. To me, it seems like it's going as intended.
Okay,
but maybe there was some original draft where this was later on, and they just didn't fully translate it. That's certainly possible.
Okay. Well, why don't we just go through, the different beats in the story and just kind of talk about what we liked and what we didn't like then. So
Sure.
Right off the bat, Jen breaks the fourth wall and she's like, oh, we're going to have Wong in this episode. That kind of gives us Twitter armor for a week. And I love the fourth wall breaking. I think that like talking about Twitter is a very important thing, because we talk about Twitter all the fucking time, right?
Yep.
And then, of course, Cousin Larry from Perfect Strangers comes back again in this episode.
Yep, good to see him too. And just to comment on the fourth wall stuff, I think they're doing just the right amount so far. It's not too little, not too much. So
yes,
happy with that so far.
I think like with Deadpool and with Fleabag, it kind of would get to be like too much of the fourth wall breaking. I do agree that they're doing like just enough for this show. So then basically her dad is only on the show just to kind of be a callback to the attack in the last episode. That's pretty much it.
Pretty much, yeah.
There's not much more to that scene than that.
Yeah, I agree.
Then the other point I have written down here is that we get introduced to Donnie Blaze. Now, you know, I've seen some people being like, is this Ghost Rider? Or like, is it going to be? It's like, no, it's not Ghost Rider. But it makes me wonder, like, why is his name so similar to Ghost Rider's name?
Yeah, that was a little weird to me. I don't understand why they did that. Especially because there have been Ghost Rider movies, even though they're outside the MCU.
Right.
You know, Robbie Reyes was heavily used in Shield, Agents of Shield. Kind of weird that they did that. I mean, I guess it does sound like a cheesy magician name. So I mean, I guess that sort of works there. And you know, that's a ridiculous theory to go and say that he's Ghost Rider. But I did read some theories about our favorite recurring what if of did they confirm Mephisto?
Oh, there you go. Okay. So Donnie Blaze is Mephisto now?
No. Essentially, the portal and that Madison goes through. She mentioned she makes a deal with the talking goat.
There you go.
Yeah, that's something. Someone stretched that into that confirming Mephisto.
Oh my God. Yeah, I could just see the thumbnail on YouTube of like a circle and it has like Mephisto's face, but kind of blurry, and like an arrow pointing it, like, guess who's coming? You know, like something like that, right? Pretty lame. I wish I knew how to make those kind of thumbnails. Anyway, so we have Johnny Blaze, and he reminded me a lot of Job from Arrested Development. Were you getting that vibe?
Totally, yeah.
Absolutely.
It's just missing the final countdown.
I'm sorry, was that?
It was just missing the final countdown.
Yes. Good point. Yeah. But you know what? It's like they're just throwing jokes out there left and right, just like joke during his like routine, and then with Madison, and then we're in the courtroom. And I felt like maybe one for every 6 jokes, I kind of laughed or something like that.
Yeah, I think, you know, there's something to be said for like a joke per minute ratio, and you know, maybe they could tone it down a little bit with that, and there's maybe a few more will land a little better. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, you know, one of the jokes was that his lawyer that was representing him kind of looked like Dan Slott. I thought it actually was Dan Slott at one point.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
Yeah. Huh. Do you know what Dan Slott looks like?
Yeah, I've seen him before. Yeah, but I don't remember putting that together. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, well, Dan Slott wrote a She-Hulk run that was very much like focusing on the courtroom stuff.
Yeah.
But I just like that you know, he started to pull like the handkerchiefs out of his, you know.
Oh yes. Okay. Yes. Now
right?
I get a better visual. Yeah, they were all doing magic at the same time. Yeah.
Right, and it was kind of goofy. It's like too much that he's doing it, but then I like that like one of the people on She-Hulk's team was like, no, even the lawyer's doing it. Like that was kind of funny.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
You know.
And I want to add too that by this point my son was watching with me, and he's like, Dad, this is boring. I want some fighting, and he actually walked away at that point. So he didn't see some of the later scenes, but one of the things I did like about this episode, maybe this is getting a little premature here, but I liked that there was a court case and it was contained to an episode. It was kind of like very, very episodic.
Yes.
I think that's a good look for the show, and I hope there's more things like that coming up. In addition, I mean, not that a multi-episode show, a law case shouldn't happen either, but it's not a bad thing for the show. I don't think.
Yeah, I completely agree. A lot of people that were on the, you know, Disney is awesome, MCU Phase 4 stuff is great side, were saying that this was the best episode so far. And so I think that probably the reason why a lot of people think that is because it's like a one and done kind of court case, you know? And I have to mention my favorite joke too, is when Donnie Blaze says, "Oh, I too have a bird," and he like, you know, throws up his middle finger.
Yeah, that was good.
Pretty good too. Yeah. So, you know, we already mentioned Wong a little bit. I have it written down that I think he's like a blessing for the MCU, definitely for Phase 4 at this point. He's kind of like the shining star of Phase 4.
Yeah, every time he's popped up has been enjoyable. I do start to worry if we're going to get a little oversaturated with it, and also when we'll see him again at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. Has there been rumors of him being in another movie or show or anything?
No, he doesn't have the marquee status to get a Wong will return kind of tag at the end of something. So
Yeah. Well, yeah, maybe I don't know. Yeah. I just love his delivery and his like kind of no nonsense attitude. The two of them sitting on the couch talking about alcoholic beverages at the end. I think that was really great.
yeah, I did like the tag. Yeah.
Yeah. But the side story for this episode was Jennifer trying to find a date. And so she's using like a dating app and she's just not having any luck with her Jennifer Walters persona. And I mentioned this in the notes, but like, there's this one date that she goes on, and it's very, very similar to a movie called Fresh, like the opening scene in this movie, Fresh. That's like one of my favorite horror movies of 2022. And if you ever get a chance to watch it, it's on Hulu, and Bucky is the main guy in it.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. I mean, please don't watch that with your son. But what I would say to you is, if you do watch it, like just give it at least a half hour of your time, because you'll see. But anyway, the date in the beginning of Fresh is just like this date that she goes on as Jennifer Walters, where the guy's kind of flaky and he like leaves and he doesn't pay the bill. And I just kind of wondered if they were inspired by that scene, because I think that movie's pretty great. But what was your take on her getting dates as She-Hulk versus Jennifer Walters?
Yeah, it could be an allegory for makeup or alcohol or something. I think,
Right.
Drunk vision, or dressing up, or catfishing, even in a sense.
Right.
But yeah, no, the logical step there was she wasn't succeeding as Jen, so she tried as She-Hulk and she had more success. But even that didn't really work out as planned. There were a lot of hangers on and superficial, extra superficial people trying to go out with her. Even the one that she thought was good and ended up being a little too superficial in the end.
Yeah, that really reminded me of half-hour sitcoms or even animated shows that we watch, like The Simpsons or Rick and Morty. And I know these people that work on this show are from Rick and Morty. Like I could definitely see Morty doing some kind of thing to get women, and it's like he has to kind of pretend to be someone else, and then that's how he gets the women. But if he's his regular self, they're not interested. And I feel like that's what happened. He's done it a couple times. Right. And there's whole movies that are like that too. And so I like that concept. Yeah, and you're right. It is kind of like a metaphor for like, maybe someone is appealing because someone is drunk, or, maybe she's done herself up with a lot of makeup, and then when, after you spend the night with her, all the makeup is off. It's like a very superficial thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, I definitely think that the show is trying to say that like men are extremely superficial. And we do see like a little bit of the other side where it's like, women are superficial too. Like she's really into this one muscular guy, that she ends up taking home at one point too. But they do kind of make it like, oh, well, he's asking her a lot about herself and he's being interested. It's not that he's just hot, and then that's why she's interested.
He seemed like he was intelligent as well. Like I think he was a doctor or something, wasn't he?
Yeah, and then he was like reading a book on feminism, like on her couch. I was like, all right, that might be like a little much,
Yeah.
Man, I mean, you have to get like more than 25 views to get canceled, right? So I think we're okay.
Oh man.
I always feel bad for Brian because I bring up all this controversial stuff and topical stuff, and he's like, "Okay, I gotta not step on that landmine right there." Like, whoops.
Sometimes I'm just like a deer in headlights. I just like, I don't know what to say now.
Right. But that's the whole thing, like, because they're very vocal on both sides. There's people that are very much against this show, and they have all these points, and it usually has to do with like it being pro-feminism. And then there are people that are very vocal about like, oh, well, you don't like this show, you must be a misogynist, or you don't like that, a woman is being so successful. And that I don't have issues either way. It's just like that the jokes landing and stuff. That's really the main problem. Is that
it's a middle of the road kind of show. Really, it's not mind blowing, but it's not awful.
Right.
That's kind of it.
Yeah, and Danny has said on my other channel, the Laster Cast, that like so many people, they treat it like it's the worst movie you've ever seen or it's the greatest movie you've ever seen. It's like it could just be a movie.
Well, I think it's a lot of the people that are like they go the extra mile to defend it are kind of like a knee jerk reaction to that typical white comic fan who's thinking that everything is being ruined by too many female characters and gender swaps and all this other stuff. So yeah, there's two extremes, and I don't see as many opinions in the middle, like kind of like we're doing here. So
yeah, and honestly, sometimes I wonder if that's why our show doesn't kind of take off more, because I feel like when you are in this sort of middle ground, it's not as sensational. And like I noticed that the people that are like very much against it, and they're very much against like the woke agenda, those people have like millions of subscribers and stuff, and you're like, what the fuck?
Yeah, because you either want an echo chamber or you want to educate yourself on what the other side is saying, like you said earlier. So that's kind of what it is. So it doesn't pay to be in the middle ground, I guess. So we sensational. She-Hulk is terrible. There's
yeah.
How can they do that to the Hulk?
Yeah. Right. Well, I feel like we're like those guys on Futurama that are like those neutral guys. You remember what I'm talking about?
Neutral guy. No, I don't remember.
All right. Well, that was a good reference I made there. Okay.
Sorry. I've watched all of Futurama at least 2 times.
They have like this like planet of people that they don't commit to one side or the other. They're just like extremely neutral.
I don't remember.
Okay. I think like Zach Brannigan like blew up their planet at one point or something too. But
anyway.
Yeah. So anyway, what else we got to say about She-Hulk?
We kind of mentioned it, but the stinger at the end where Jen is served the papers for she's being sued for the trademark over her name, which she didn't even like at first. After seeing the trailer, I'm semi interested. This seems like it's going to be a multi-episode kind of arc thing, where and we're going to see more of Titania, and I'm curious to see how that will look better than it did in the first episode. But it's interesting that I think she's going to be using the name on a makeup line, and and they actually did that in the real world too, which is interesting. And we're going to get more Daredevil. So bring it on.
Yes. Daredevil in the yellow suit.
Yes, Daredevil in the yellow suit. And I remember reading that there was like one of the things they said that they had to do was that Daredevil had been wearing this costume, and I'm curious why. I saw someone post online somewhere about this is more about Daredevil Born Again, but the idea that during the blip Daredevil was gone, but Kingpin wasn't, and that's kind of what it's about. Like Kingpin like rebuilt his whole crime empire, and Daredevil comes back, and it's like, he has to start all over again.
Oh, that's intriguing, because it's like a couple of things, right? It's implying that like you have a character that you've never seen in the regular MCU. I know he's on the Netflix shows, but like we've never seen him in the MCU. So he's established before the blip, and then he goes away because of the blip. They haven't done anything like that yet.
Yeah. And then, I think that sets up a good way for Kingpin to build himself back up. And obviously we have seen him in a show. I mean, we saw Matt in Spider-Man, obviously, but we didn't see Daredevil.
Did you and I talk about how Kingpin is supposed to have an eye patch in Daredevil Reborn?
No, I didn't hear that.
So I guess I talked about it. Yeah, because remember Echo shot him at the end of Hawkeye? So I think he's supposed to have an eye patch.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, man. Okay, well, I'm intrigued. We're up to episode 4, and there's 5 more She-Hulks to go?
5 more, should be 9, yeah.
Okay, all right. I'm down, yeah. And now we can do our little segue where we're like, now let's really talk about something we're excited about, right? So we're going to talk about episodes 7, 8, and 9 of The Sandman. And we got The Doll's House, Playing House, and Collectors. Now, you said that you read The Doll's House trade, right?
Yes, I read. So I watched the first episode here. So that's 7. I watched 7, and then I basically read the whole trade, and then finished everything. Well, I didn't finish the episode 11 yet, but yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's like a different story altogether, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's like the first 2 issues of the 3rd volume. So
okay. Yeah, it's interesting because the Sandman comic, I think, is only like 74 or 75 issues. And I think the show, for the most part, is like maybe like the first 20 issues, not even.
16. It's the first 2 trades. But pretty much like exactly.
Yeah. Cool. So I think in that Doll's House, you could start correcting me if I'm wrong, but in that trade, then you have the serial killer convention, you have the Dream Vortex. Hector Hall is in it, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then in that second trade, that's the one that does have the story with like Hobgadling in it and Shakespeare. Do you see Shakespeare as well? Okay.
Yeah, that was weird because they start off with the story about Rose, and then they jump into that, and then they go back to the other story or something like. No, I'm sorry, that's wrong. They start off with the story about the woman that they met and that he met in hell. Is it Nada?
Yeah, I know who you're talking about though. Yeah, his like love.
They give her story. That's the first issue of the trade. Then the Hobgadling story. And I definitely think it made sense to move that up with the Sound of Her Wings episode 2. Like I think that fit well. And they would have not, they kind of would have broken the pace a little bit otherwise. But so it's all pretty much there. I think the biggest departures are with the stuff with Hector. Obviously, they don't use him in the show because it's a DC character. Part of me kind of likes how they split it up, and it's different. So Lyda is was a part of that story with Jed in his own little dreaming with is it Blurt and Gob? No, Glob. No.
So in the comic it's different, right? Because in the show you have Galt, who's like a nightmare, and that's the one that's kind of behind that whole situation, right? But in the show,
Brute and Glob, they're in the comics, yes. So and they mentioned there are 4 missing Arcana in the comic, and that's them, and they lowered it down to 3 in the show.
Yeah. Well, I like the way that the show sort of condenses things and makes things tighter. It definitely it just makes more sense, and it's less confusing to people that aren't like big hardcore comic book fans. When you were talking about before about the idea of like, oh, well, there's these kind of random stories tucked in there in the overarching story. I know that Neil Gaiman said that one of the great things about writing the Sandman was that whenever he was interested about something, he would just work it into a story. And I think that sort of makes the stories be all over the place. And it's just like whenever he felt like writing in the moment. And so one other thing too, I saw this in a recent interview with Neil Gaiman, was that DC was always coming to him and saying, okay, well, just write to the end of this story arc and then your book is going to be over. Like, we're going to cancel your book. Just get to issue 12 and we're going to cancel your book. And what would happen is once they would finish an arc, they'd be like, okay, well, we still actually need you for some more arcs. And so like he would just kind of be like every trade worth of stories. The book would essentially be renewed, you know?
Interesting. Huh.
Yeah. So, we got a little comment over here from a watcher. Let's see. Did anyone catch She-Hulk and Blaze's old man to be a demon god of hell, dark wizard Mephisto? Is this like, are we getting spammed here? Catch She-Hulk and Blaze's old man to be a demon god of hell, dark. Push place to use real magic.
I have no idea. But that's kind of where it's going with that I mentioned earlier, that people think that Madison met Mephisto, made a deal with Mephisto in hell.
Yeah. And one other thing kind of to call back to that too, like Mephisto often is connected to, I mean, in the movie, obviously, of Ghost Rider with Nicolas Cage, Mephisto and Ghost Rider are connected. But I've read multiple stories where like Mephisto and Ghost Rider and the Hulk have all been kind of tied together. And the Hulk and Ghost Rider were on a team called the Defenders. So it's kind of cool to tie it together. And it would make it interesting if like Donnie Blaze became something more. But, thank you, Mav11. They said, thanks, sorry to interrupt, you guys rock. Oh, well, that makes us feel real happy to have someone say that because, yeah. But yeah, Mav, if you've enjoyed Sandman too, then, please feel free to join in the conversation too. But so let's go back to Sandman then real quick then. So, okay, this actually could kind of tie in with what we were just saying about Mephisto too. I watched this interview with Neil Gaiman recently where he was saying that the guy, John Peters, who produced the original Batman movie and Wild Wild West, right? You remember that Kevin Smith video I showed you?
Yeah.
Neil Gaiman said that John Peters bought the rights to Superman, to Wild Wild West, and to Sandman. He bought the rights to all three of those in one shot. And the reason why he bought Sandman was because he thought that Morpheus looked cool. That's the only reason, right? And then he had someone write a script, and they showed the script to Neil Gaiman. Have you heard the story?
Yes, this is where he leaks it so it doesn't get made.
Right. So Neil Gaiman leaks the story to Ain't It Cool News, and they talk about how it's like the worst script they ever read. Right. But did you hear the details about the script?
I know that it had the giant spider in it.
Mm-hmm.
And he wanted to put it so badly in a movie that eventually ended up in Wild Wild West.
Yes. But do you know about Lucifer and the Corinthian?
No.
So in this version of the script, Lucifer, the Corinthian, and Dream are triplets. They're all brothers, right? Okay. And each one of them is trying to get all three of Dream's arcana. And so that's what the whole movie is about. It's almost like an action movie of them trying to get the helmet and the ruby and the sand.
That doesn't even make any sense in terms of the original comic at all.
Yes. Thank the Lord above that we got this show instead of that.
I wonder if that script is still around. I'm curious to go look at it.
I would love to see that. Yeah. I'm sorry. So I'm talking so much. I'm assuming that we see more of Desire and Despair in episode 10, but at least by episode 7, we see Desire and Despair. What do you think of those two characters in their scene?
They're twins. Obviously, they could tell they're very interconnected. There, I believe they're the younger siblings of Dream.
Yes.
And for whatever reason, Desire has it out for him. And has kind of, as she, he, they, she, they.
They's the best one, I think.
I would say they. They're the one who put in motion the plan to have him get captured by Roderick Burgess and interfere and all this other stuff. So this is not the first time they've taken a run at him, and it will not be the last.
Yes. One of the things I love about this show so much and about the comic is that you have a family dynamic where it works, where it's like just siblings not liking each other and having issues. And it also kind of is like that sort of that royal family dynamic that you'd see in like Game of Thrones or something like that.
Yeah.
But then it also works on like a metaphorical level where like Desire might actually get in the way of your dreams, or Desire might not like the fact that you have dreams, and Despair certainly does not like that you have dreams. So it, like on a metaphorical level, it works too.
Yeah.
I love that.
And I got to say too, it hasn't been really hinted at what it is, but I am real curious, as someone who hasn't read the entire comic, as who the prodigal son is at this point that has been missing for even longer than Dream. I hope they get to that at some point, and wink if they do. Okay.
Yeah, in the comic, I'm winking. Yeah. But so we'll see. So and then as someone that's read the comic a little bit, then you know that like Despair is like naked in the comic, and all the Endless are like pale with like dark hair for the most part. There are a couple that are not like that, but like Desire, Dream, Death, and Despair are all like pale like that.
Yes.
So it was like a little off-putting when like Desire was like this. Despair was this like blonde woman with like a turtleneck on, and I was like, whoa, that's different,
Yeah, it was a little different. Yeah. Yeah.
So in the comic, because you read it more recently than me, is it the case that Unity Kincaid had that sleeping sickness, and then like her great granddaughter was
just her granddaughter was Rose. Yeah. So
Rose Walker? Yeah.
Yeah. So they don't skip a generation here. It's literally, and Rose's mother is alive. So Rose and her mother, I believe her name is Miranda. They both go to England to meet Unity, and she tells them that your Miranda is her daughter, and Rose is her granddaughter, and that she was given up for adoption because she was asleep. Like, what are you gonna do? They put her in a foster home, and she woke up and she wanted to find them. So in this, it's interesting that Rose's mother is dead. We're talking about a great grandmother at this point, and it's interesting that Lyta has kind of stepped into the role that Miranda plays, sort of, while also retaining her role that she played as Lyta with living in a dream with her dead husband, which is Hector.
Yes. That was the part that sort of rubbed me the wrong way, I wouldn't say it was bad. I actually have nothing. I don't have a single criticism about these 3 episodes at all. But the one part where I was like, oh, that's a little weird or different was that Unity conceives a child in the dreaming, and then Lyta also conceives. It was like, oh, they both are going to conceive a child,
Yeah. In the comic, to me, it wasn't as clear that, or maybe it's just because I didn't know it at the time and I knew it when I watched the show. To me, when I read the comic, I thought it was something happened to her physically in the real world, but it most likely was. It happened in a dream both times. But you know what? No, they did say it was in the comic. It happened in a dream. She dreamed she had a baby and she woke up and that was the only thing that was real. Never mind, I'm wrong. So yeah, it's a little weird. But it does happen. It does happen and to both of them in the comic though. So
yes. Well, so can we go into the Lyta stuff, or am I going to really annoy you by talking about all this Dr. Fate shit?
No, go for it. Yeah, no, I'm actually really interested here. I should have picked up on it a lot better because I'm like, Hall, that's like Carter Hall, Hawkman, but I'm like, nah, no way.
Yes.
But yeah, go for it, yeah.
Like, one of our videos that got the most views ever, like on TikTok and on YouTube, was when I started to talk about the Watchmen characters, right? And how they have their DC counterparts, right? I love shit like that. I eat shit like that up. That's like my favorite thing in the world. And when it comes to the JSA characters like Dr. Fate and Hawkman, like, they have the most fucking convoluted, weird ass backstories, right?
Yeah.
And hold on, and then I'm gonna get something too. Hold on, don't go anywhere. I don't want to trip. I can still talk too, so it's not awkward. But let me just show you. I went to the comic book store today, and I actually bought some more of these tie-in comics for the Black Adam movie. So that's Cyclone from the JSA, right? And then this is Atom Smasher. Okay. They have, right? And so, like, obviously they're working the JSA into that Black Adam movie starring The Rock. And I also, when I went to the library, I picked up Sandman trades.
Nice.
But unfortunately, it was just like the first trade, then like 6, 7, and 8. So it kind of skips some of the stuff that we're talking about now.
Yeah, that's all right.
And I also got Black Orchid, which was a comic that Neil Gaiman worked on at one point too.
Oh, I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember, but she was actually a character on like the Justice League Dark at one point too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So anyway, let's jump into this Dr. Fate bullshit. And please, like, definitely talk over me because I don't want to fucking lecture you. And I know that you know some of this shit too, but this is really just for our audience, right? So the original Dr. Fate is Kent Nelson. He's on the original Justice Society. So he goes and fights in World War II, all that kind of shit. Second Dr. Fate is Eric Strauss, and he actually gets reincarnated. And his wife is the third Dr. Fate, and she gets reincarnated. They both get killed and they get reincarnated at one point. The fourth Dr. Fate is Inza Kramer Nelson. So she is the wife of Kent Nelson. She's his love interest. And then the fifth Dr. Fate is that, like, kind of that extreme, Fate character. Remember him from like 0 Hour?
No.
He's not called Dr. Fate. He's got like black hair and he's got like a little tattoo on his eye. He looks like Cable kind of, but he's Fate.
Okay.
Right? Okay. Here's where it gets fucking weird and crazy. The Sixth Doctor Fate. So you know that costume that Jed is wearing in the episode?
Yep.
Okay.
The hourglass on it, red and yellow. Yep.
Okay. So in the comics, have you seen that superhero in the comic, the Sandman comic yet?
Yes.
Okay, so you know this shit a little bit. So
yeah.
This is just basically for our audience then, okay? So that is Hector Hall. And Hector Hall in the comics is the son of Hawkman and Hawkwoman. So Carter Hall and Shara Hall have a kid, Hector Hall. And he gets involved with like the adventures of the Justice Society's kids, and they fight villains from the Justice Society. And at one point, he even fucking gets killed, Hector Hall, right? At one point, his ghost goes into the dreaming, and he becomes the Sandman. So you have the son of Hawkman and Hawkwoman becoming the Sandman at one point. And he's like the superhero, the Sandman, where he has like a costume and shit. Just like Jed in the show. Anyway, just like in the show, he's kind of in this sort of severed pocket dream space that is Jed's imagination. And he's like a superhero there. And at one point, he does get with his girlfriend, Lyda, and they have a kid. And I'm not going to tell you what happens to the kid in the Sandman comics, but it's a major part of the whole Sandman story. But it just kind of blows my mind that the son of Hawkman and Hawkwoman becomes the Sandman, and then his like daughter or his kid is connected to. Oh, this is why I'm stumbling. Because one last thing, he gets fucking reincarnated, comes back to life, and he becomes the seventh Dr. Fate.
Yes.
So that's why it's like, so the dude was the son of Hawkman and Hawkwoman. He becomes the Sandman, and then he eventually becomes Dr. Fate. So that's crazy, right?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. So they're all interconnected. Sandman, Dr. Fate, and Hawkman and Hawk.
I mean, I know in the show that they're obviously is Lyda, and it obviously her husband is Hector. Did they ever mention their last name as being Hall?
Yes, they do say Lyda Hall in that first episode.
I'm surprised that was left in there, because it is still sort of connected to DC, more to DC then.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at one point when you're looking at Jed's like imaginary world, and Galt is like pretending to be his mom, she's looking at this bank of screens, and she kind of is like Amanda Waller. Like I feel like that actress kind of had a little bit of shades of Amanda Waller going there.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah. And on the screens, it was like they had these like Silver Age pictures of like Flash rogues and stuff.
I didn't notice that, but I did notice the action figures on the around the room. There was like a Batman and a Flash like toy action figure on the in front of the monitors.
Okay, but like they showed Pied Piper because they had rats come out of the sewer at one point.
They mention him. Yeah, then you even hear the flute. Yeah,
but like when they showed the villains, it was kind of like when you play a slot machine and it shows a bunch of faces. And I could have sworn they showed like maybe like Heatwave, or they showed a couple of like DC villains. We'll have to look this shit up.
Check that out. Yeah.
But I just, the show does this really great thing of kind of referencing DC, but then also could just be completely independent and it doesn't matter,
Yeah, there's a lot more DC in the comics. Like I mentioned in the last episode, there was Martian Manhunter's in it, Mr. Miracle's in it, Scarecrow is in it, pretty prominently. But they get around all of that. But it's interesting in this episode that they didn't shy away as much there. They kind of went for it.
Right, they went all in.
That's very interesting to me.
Yeah. So let's kind of go into the specifics of what happens in the story. So Dream is hunting down these three rogue, like nightmares or dreams that are in the real world. And the first one that he's able to get is Galt, who is a nightmare that essentially doesn't want to be a nightmare anymore. And so that becomes a big theme of the second episode, which is like, you are born a certain way, you have a purpose, but then you don't want to have that purpose anymore. You want to change. And like in the comic, you've probably even seen this by reading the first two trades, that like Dream is very much like, you're supposed to do what your purpose is. This is what you're made for. And he doesn't like the idea of change. Have you seen that in the comic? Or
Yeah, definitely. He's definitely a lot more rigid and by the book in the comics. They do show him kind of growing and bending a little bit, but I think they're making that a lot more prominent in the show. That he's kind of changing his mind by the end of every episode on whatever he makes a stance on.
Yeah. And with Galt, he is rough. He sends her to the darkness just because she doesn't want to be a nightmare anymore. But she even has like a line of like, even nightmares can dream or something like that, or like a nightmare can have hope, something like that, which is like a major theme of this show, which is like,
so,
you know, good.
Do you recall if Galt shows up in a later story? Because her role was in the comics was Brute and Glob, but he's kind of like monstery looking, almost goofy looking little monstery guys.
I'm
not
sure.
They don't have the same resolution. They just get kind of sent away in the darkness, and that's it. Like, you don't see them again. Like, there's no redemption for them in the comic.
If anything, I think that Galt might have like a smaller role in the comic, and maybe it's just like a name. I'm not sure. I have to reread it, but I do kind of feel like watching this show that there was like a major intention of, we have to make the cast more diverse. We have so many characters that are just white men. We need to have like black female characters on here. We have to have, and so I would not be surprised if like Galt was an original character. And because I'm assuming that what's her face, that is the Vortex,
Rose
Walker, right?
Rose Walker,
right? Yeah, she's like a blonde girl in the comic, right?
Yeah, the hair is very similar, but yeah, she's a white blonde girl essentially.
Yeah, and so like,
as is Unity.
Right. So like, I think that they are making like an active change to have it be more diverse, and so I think that just to maybe, since Jed and Rose are black, it's just like Galt looks black, you know, just so that she looks.
Well, like yeah, because they used the same actress to play their mother, so
right.
Makes total sense there.
Yeah. So I've loved every single bit of this show. I'm so glad that you agreed to watch this with me.
Yeah.
And I love the stuff that happens in the dreaming. We got to finally meet Murph Pumpkinhead. What'd you think of him?
Was it Mark Hamill? It sounds like him, but I wasn't 100% sure.
Mark Hamill.
So I don't recall him showing up in the comic yet. But they've been showing characters earlier than they appear in the comic. Like, we see the Corinthian way earlier. We see Matthew way earlier. We see Lucien way earlier. So I'm wondering if he's going to show up in the next volume of the comic that I'm about to read. Because I don't think I've seen him yet.
Yeah, he does show up later, I think, too. I actually really like him in the comic. He's sort of this like guy that complains all the time, and he's like an everyman that's like just kind of working on practical things, even though he's in this like fantasy realm. He's like kind of fixing barn doors and stuff, right? His design always makes me think of Return to Oz, right?
Yeah, I can see that.
And the way they animated him in the show, like it looks like a regular human body for the most part, and they could just be using a regular actor. But then like the CGI kind of looks like that sort of I can't remember the people that make those specials, but like that sort of that stop motion claymation stuff from like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and Frosty the Snowman. Like the way his mouth would move, it reminded me of that.
It looked pretty CG to me, but maybe I'll go back and take another pass at it.
Oh, I definitely think it's CG. I just think that it was like done in that kind of fashion.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. So, I've been talking a lot about this show. Do you have things to say about these first two episodes? Yeah, no, I think we haven't really talked about the house that she goes to, because the whole story is that she had to separate. Her and her mother had to separate from Jed because the father wouldn't let him go for whatever reason. I'm assuming maybe they're only half siblings. I'm not sure. So they go to London. They meet there, and Rose is sent back to America to find Jed, which is something she was doing anyway. She goes to stay in this house with these weird people. There's Hal, who's this kind of like
cross-dressing guy, and he has an alter ego as Dolly, and like a drag show. There are these two creepy like goth girls that are Chantal and Zelda, and then there's Ken and Barbie. They're like a couple, and their names are Ken and Barbie.
Yes.
And then and then of course there's Gilbert, who you don't meet at first, but he becomes more important as we go on. The major thing here is that the major arc overall is that there's a dream vortex, which when I first heard it, it sounds like very MacGuffin-y to me.
Yes.
I like the idea of what it is, but it's just like the way they talked about it at first kind of seemed a little like hyper important, and it felt a little off to me. But I do like the story overall, I think. So the idea of the dream vortex is that every couple thousand years or so, there's a human born that has this incredible dreaming power where they essentially break the walls down between dreams and they make one big dream, and it could literally end life in the universe. And Dream mentions that this happened once before, so it's his job to go and kill the vortex.
Right.
They also make a big deal that the vortex this time is a woman. I'm very curious as to why, because I don't think they ever really elaborated why that's so different. I felt maybe they were implying that previously it was something inanimate or something. I guess they could mean it was a male before. I don't know, but they made a real point to point out that this time it's special and it's different because it's a woman, but they didn't really give enough context to say why that was special or different.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure. I don't really think that they reference dream vortexes throughout the rest of the Sandman run. Like, I don't think there's a whole nother arc that deals with the dream vortex. And like I said, it goes up to like issue 75. I mean, there might be one character that might be like that, but I think that's it. And so, like I told you a couple of times now, I read this trade like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And so I'm just remembering from 20 years ago. But what always stood out was that cast of characters in the doll's house. And I always like the imagery. You know, we've been talking about Sandman for weeks now, and we haven't mentioned there's various artists that work on the Sandman comic. It's almost like there's a different artist every story arc, right? But Dave McKeon, who's an artist that works a lot with Neil Gaiman, would always do the artwork for the covers. And I remember for the doll's house, you know, it really evoked the feeling of a dollhouse. And that's what these interesting characters inside the house always felt like. They were like dolls as part of some kind of play that was being put on.
Even right? the house that they were living in very much resembled the toy doll house that Unity has in her room.
Right.
And it's interesting because it's like all these characters that seem very, very different. You wouldn't normally think they get along, but they do. And it's really interesting.
Right. And you know, literally two of them are Ken and Barbie.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. So yeah. But I just remember the individual characters. And I said this last episode too, that like reading it 20 years ago, it wasn't so commonplace to have like transgender characters or characters that were in drag or something like that. Was more taboo back then, right? And so her one friend that kind of takes her in the house, you know, that I remember reading that and being like, oh, this is kind of cutting edge stuff, you know, and you know, so much has changed since then. And I love that this show just, it doesn't flinch. It just is like, you know, we're going to have transgender characters. We're going to just do whatever we want. We're just going to show all this stuff now. And there's pushback from it. But have you seen on Twitter actually that like Neil Gaiman has been getting pushback from the Rings of Power show?
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
I love that he's running with it too. It's like, oh, I'm sorry. I'll make sure I never ruin any Lord of the Rings properties in the future.
Yeah. I mean, he's such an incredible guy. I've been like loving watching the show and then like listening to interviews with him about talking about it and stuff like that. It's been so great, you know, and I'm sad that we only have 2 episodes left.
Yeah.
But I wanted to, before we kind of wrapped everything up, I wanted to talk about the Corinthian because he's such a big part of this 3 episodes that we're discussing here.
Yeah. And like I mentioned before, he appeared much earlier in the show than he did in the comics, and he seems to have a much bigger role in everything in the show than in the comics so far.
Yeah. And you recognize that actor, right? That plays him?
Yeah, he plays Donald Pierce in Logan.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you still haven't seen The Predator, right?
No, I haven't seen that. Oh, he's in that too. That's right. Yeah.
He's the main guy. Yeah, yeah. But
Right.
he's fucking fantastic on this show. He's almost like perpetually smiling.
Yeah. He's very creepy. I think he does an excellent job of conveying what the character is meant to be.
Yeah. Because a character that is like, supposed to be like smooth and smiling all the time, that could come off as cheesy, but he does it just right to where he's like menacing but smooth.
Yeah, I agree.
And like one of my favorite things was when he had Jed and they were kind of driving across country, and he's being like kind of like a role model to Jed, and he's talking about like following the rules, not following the rules. I actually really liked that a lot.
Yeah, and that was a bit different. They didn't really interact in that way. How they got Jed to that convention seemed very different in the comic than in the show. I actually think I felt like it made more sense in the show than the comic. Like it was a little bit too much of a coincidence in the comic, and it made a little bit more sense in the show, I think.
What happened in the comic?
Well, I mean, he still lives with that couple, but Jed runs away, and some woman finds him, but then the uncle finds him. But then I think the Corinthian kills the uncle, and then he's just happens to be in the trunk of the car. I think.
Oh.
I don't think he realizes there were some. He just happens to be in the trunk of the car, and then he just happens to end up at the serial convention.
Okay. So yeah, the show's better then. Yeah.
Maybe, I mean, it's very possible I'm wrong. I mean, I read these very quickly, and it was about a week ago at this point, so yeah. I could be crossed my wires a little bit, but I felt like how they got all the pieces in place for the show was a little more coherent to me than the original.
Yeah. Well, regardless, the serial convention, like once again, like when I read that 20 years ago, I was like, whoa, this is so different. And I just was like, what a unique idea to have a convention of serial killers, all these weirdos, right? Now, in the comic, do they go into as much detail as they do in the show?
Pretty much, yeah. The speech that Mr. Nimrod gives is pretty much identical. We don't shit where we eat and all that. They do show a lot of the panel. Like there's a scene in the show where, and maybe this is the wrong episode.
Go ahead, it's okay.
Okay, so this might be going into episode 10 or not, but Rose and Gilbert are walking around, and Gilbert.
That's in episode 9.
Okay. So Gilbert walks into the various other rooms, and he sees the panels that are going on. So they do show all that stuff. They do recruit the Corinthian in a similar way to be the kind of guest speaker, because their existing guest speaker doesn't show up, the family man or whatever. Yeah, no, it's pretty. They do go into a decent amount of detail there, and Funland is there as well, and that's kind of where the episode ends, I believe, right?
Yes. What happens is the very last scene is Funland is coming after Rose and Jed. He's gonna get them, and the Corinthian stabs him in the back. That's the last scene.
So that I don't think he dies the same way. I think. Oh, that's what happens. So Gilbert gives Rose a note to say, if you're in any trouble, say this name, and he'll come help you. And that name is Morpheus. So Funland is actually just cornering Rose only at this point, and then she calls out to Morpheus, and that's when he appears, and I think he does something to Funland, probably just puts him to sleep. I don't remember, and then you see him appear in the kind of the main floor or the main convention area where the Corinthians giving the speech, and then that whole scene is pretty much, shot for shot.
Okay. Well, that'll happen.
Oh, that's the last episode. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I can kind of assume, and I also read it like 20 years ago too. But
sorry.
No, it's okay. And that's sort of like Morpheus's go-to is to put people to sleep, right? It's just like, you're going to sleep, right?
Yeah. No, the interesting thing I think about the comic versus the show is that there are such large stretches where Dream is just not even there.
That's right. That's right.
They seem to insert him a lot more into various points just to say like, oh yeah, I'm still the main character, I'm still here.
Right.
The comic is, veers off into the side characters a lot deeper, I think.
Yes. Yeah, and sometimes in the comic, it's just he's literally just a character standing in the background.
Yep.
That's it. But I love it. And one thing, I just made a joke about how he puts people to sleep, but like the Golden Age Sandman character, who was like a vigilante, like the Shadow, that was like his main thing, was he would like put people to sleep with gas. Wesley Dodd, that version of the Sandman. So, just that's how awesome Neil Gaiman is to kind of even keep it like that a little bit, even though it's like much more elaborate and like mythological. So I just like a real quick note I wanted to make about that convention. Obviously, I think there's a little bit of commentary there on like comic book conventions. I'm sure Neil Gaiman had a lot of experience at comic book conventions at that point. There's also sort of commentary on like mental illness and people like being like that believing in their convictions so much that like they do horrible things. Like there's this one panel that they run into where they're all talking about religion and each person is like talking about their own religious belief and how it justifies them being a serial killer. I think that's some great stuff.
That all that ties in really well with what happens in the last episode and the last issue in the arc, and what Dream says. So, but I'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah, and like one thing, and this could be a little plug for my other channel too. Like on the Lastercast, I'm actually about to interview Michael J. Seidlanger, who is a writer who has written a book called My Pet Serial Killer. He also wrote a book about home invasion called Anybody Home. I'm going to interview him tomorrow. But the thing about books like that and about serial killers is that you see into the mind of the truly depraved. And that's what this serial convention on this show really captures, is like just how twisted people can be. And they love it, and they think that they're right. And that's what the Sandman comic does in general, is it almost like, you remember in like Lock and Key, the comic, when they could like turn the key in the person's neck and you could like see their head?
Yep.
Well, go ahead. What's that?
The head key.
the head key. Right. But like, Joe Hill and Neil Gaiman are friends. And I think that Joe Hill was probably inspired by Neil Gaiman in the 90s and stuff. And that is I feel like that's so inspired by Sandman. It's just the idea of like, you see into the person's mind of what they really think. And that's such a big part of the comic. And I think they really have translated that well into the show. And I just love that so much.
Yeah, it's really good. Although I do have to say, I think overall I did like the first half of the show better.
Okay.
So, like I liked the stuff with John D a little better than this, I think.
Yes. Okay.
But what I really do appreciate about this arc is that how it expands more on the dreaming and the realm and the relationships that exist between the endless. They kind of start to branch out a little bit more. Yes. And it's interesting, and it makes me wish there was a second season already, so I could start reading and then watching side by side. But at this point, I'm just going to read the whole thing, and then if we get a season 2, I'll forget everything by then.
Right. Yeah, well, that's great, man. Because the comic, the stuff that you said you're so into, like that's what the comic goes into moving forward. So you're good to go. And then if the show ever does come out, if it comes out on Netflix, we're just going to get once a week installments. So that works for me. Yeah. Cool, man. Well, as always, it's been a real pleasure talking about this stuff with you. Looks like we actually had quite a few viewers today too.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. So thank you guys for
are better than 9:00 at night or 10:00 at night.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So guys, thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate you. If you could leave us a like, oh man, that'd be awesome. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. Brian and I are here once a week, always talking about your favorite streaming shows and movies. So I'm sure we're gonna have a lot of stuff to talk about with the D23 announcement. But next week we'll be back for some more Sandman and some more She-Hulk. So we will see you guys next Thursday.